If I didn't break the microphone, good. Okay. Hey, PBC. Isn't it great to be here? Have you had a good week? Have you had a great week? Hasn't it been great to be together with friends that you love and you don't see all the time? And be a blessing to each other, lift each other up, encourage each other's faith. To see something as beautiful as a devotion to God like we saw tonight. Isn't it great to be here? It's so good to be here. I hope you'll bear with me, and I hope you'll pray for me. I'm going to try and do something that I don't normally do in public. I do it in the shower, but I don't know. I'm going to keep my clothes on. But I'm going to sing a song, and chances are good I won't get all the way through it. So, but if you'll pray for me, maybe I will. It's a song that means a lot to me. It's one that me and my siblings, my sister says if she hears it, she ugly cries. Because it means that to all of us. It's a song from the 1960s by a group called Peter, Paul, and Mary. And it goes like this. Tell me why you are crying, my son. I know you're frightened like everyone. Is it the thunder in the distance you fear? Will it help if I stay very near? I am here, and if you take my hand, my son, all will be well when the day is done. And if you take my hand, my son, all will be well when the day is done. Day is done when the day is done. Day is done when the day is done. Day is done when the day is done. Day is done. You ask why I'm sighing, my son. You shall inherit what mankind has done, and a world filled with sorrow and woe. If you ask me why this is so, I really don't know. But if you'll take my hand, my son, all will be well when the day is done. And if you'll take my hand, my son, all will be well when the day is done. Day is done when the day is done. Day is done when the day is done. Day is done when the day is done. Day is done. Tell me why you are smiling, my son. Have you a secret you can tell everyone? Do you know more than men who are wise? Can you see what we all must disguise through your loving eyes? And if you take my hand, my son, all will be well when the day is done. And if you take my hand, my son, all will be well when the day is done, when the day is done. Day is done when the day is done. Day is done when the day is done. Day is.
You got it. It's okay, you got
this. In my mind's eye, I can see him standing on the deep pile shag carpeting with the little tracks through it that I used to use to drive my cars. He's got his head thrown back, and his dark rich beard frames this gorgeous smile, and his baritone voice is bouncing off the ceiling as he stands behind the 1970s stereo with its monster speakers, and he's holding my hand, and we're dancing. And he sweeps me up into his arms, and he sings to me, "Day is done. All is well right now. I'm safe. I'm loved. My dear Father is holding me and singing to me. And I am his treasure, and he is mine, and everything is right in the world." There's a reason that my siblings cry, though. It's been 40 years this year. You'd think it would get better. It's an April day in 1981 when a highway trooper showed up in the early morning hours when it was still dark to knock on the door. My dad had been in a car accident. That wasn't the first time that had ever happened, but it was the last. Because he was gone. That's a song that makes promises. And I was 9 years old when I learned that the promises can't always be kept. The one that really gets to me is the one about the thunder. Is it the thunder in the distance you fear? Will it help if I stay? Well, as a matter of fact, yeah, I kind of would. That'd be great. It'd be great. I'd love to take your hand right now. Right now. I'd love you to meet my kids. I'd love you to be there when I got married. Yeah, there's a lot I'm scared of. And yeah, I wish you were there. Oh, I wish you were there. But so many days have come and gone. We live in a world where the promises aren't always kept. We live in a world where there's an awful lot of mourning and crying and pain. So much pain. It's enough to make you wonder, if the world's got to be like this, why make it in the first place? If you're an all-powerful, all-knowing God, why would you create a world, fill it up with sentient beings and let them suffer? Why even do this? Is the exercise even worth it when there's so many tears? And some of you know what I'm talking about. I mean, maybe not exactly the same pain. You may not have had a dad who died when you were young, but you have had plenty to weep about, right? This world, you've walked through the sorrow, you've walked through the pain. Why even make it in the first place? 2 years ago, well, no, 3 years ago, I guess, 2 camp periods now, we have spent time looking at the book of Revelation. And when Kent Massey first dreamed up this theme, he was headed toward this night. We have spent time looking at an awful lot of weird things. If you've been in my class, then you've been there when the first vision is about a throne room. And last year we didn't do anything. The year before that, we looked at those critters that surround the throne. You remember that? Those 4 different monster things sitting beside God's throne. And the one who sits on the throne, so glorious, so beautiful, so wondrous. And this year, the things we have looked at, they haven't been quite as beautiful, have they? But they are the conditions of the world in which you live. This world that's filled with brokenness, where dads die. You live in a world that's marked by conquerors and wars and famine and death. I mean, that's not the whole picture, right? Look around you. This world is gorgeous. It's clearly a work of art made by a master, one so beautiful, so wondrous, that if his imaginations are these, what is he like? Look around you again. Look at the people that surround you, friends you can love, friends who will love you. You can open up your hearts to them. Be supported and cared for. If God would make creatures so capable of love, what must his love be? But look around you. The world's a broken place. And the monsters that we've looked at this week are these big cosmic things, these big monstrous horses that lead the nations and lead them to fight against each other. Sure, but they're also descriptions of my heart. You know, we live in a world where the conqueror, that's the human impulse. To want to be master of the world around me. I'm right after all. I'm just, I'm right, I'm good. So other people need to submit their will to me. It needs to go the way I want it to. And you know, the nations will do this to each other, but folks, so will we. We'll climb right up on that horseman's back and ride along with him. You doubt it. Do you have any political opinions? Any ideas about what you think is right and just? If anyone differs with you, how do you treat them? You know, because if you want to be cruel to those who differ from you, and you want to say they're being awful, they're terrible people, if that's where you are, you're on the back of that horse. And if you'll use hatred against them, you're on the back of another horse. Because war is built up in the human heart. It's the nature of nations because it's the nature of humans, and we'll mistreat each other and do awful things. We'll say terrible things about each other, destroy one another's reputation. My goodness, we'll even use violence against each other. And where war goes, famine follows close behind in the nations. But it's also true with us because we end up afraid. We end up with scarcity all around us. And we end up thinking, you know what, I could lose. And the world will teach you that you're right to think that you could lose. Because daddies die here. Which is, of course, the last horse, which we hope would just stay away. But its hoofbeats are pounding all around us. And sometimes it shows up at your door, and the person who gets off the horse is a highway patrolman who tells you you're never going to see your dad again. It's 40 years ago. You'd think it wouldn't hurt so bad. Why even do it? If this is what it's going to be, why even mess with it? Unless, maybe this isn't the end. And maybe the end's worth it. You think, wow, it's awful bad. It'd have to be something awful good. Don't underestimate your God. In the book of Revelation, the very first thing that we see is a throne and someone seated on the throne. And you know what he says in the book of Revelation? Well, for most of it, he doesn't say anything. For the overwhelming majority of the book, the one who's seated on the throne says not one word. When the horsemen come out, it's the critters that sit around the throne that call out to the horsemen and tell them to come. When the trumpets get played and the partial wrath of God gets poured out on the world, the guy sitting on the throne says not one word. When the bowls of God's wrath are poured out and creation suffers and is punished, he sits through it quietly all the way. And when the nations are so awful that they're like a harlot riding on a beast, he is still mute and mum. Which actually feels kind of like the world I'm living in right now. There's so often I wish he would speak, don't you? So often I've called out to him and said, come, please help. Things are not okay. We're hurting here. Please. And he's just still. For 20 full chapters, the one who is seated on the throne, who we're introduced to at the very beginning of the book, says not one word. And then in chapter 21, verse 5, at last, the one who is seated on the throne speaks and says, Edu, Kaina, Poyo, Panta. Behold, new I make everything. At last he speaks, and he speaks with the most wondrous statement, I make everything new. And he doesn't say, I make new things. He's not starting over, but he is restoring every broken thing. He is making it like it always should have been. He is recreating, starting afresh, and making it all like it was and how it always should have been. Because, folks, the way it is not how it should have been. There should not have been conquest. We were created to love one another. That's what we're for, not to conquer and rule over each other. And it's so common, we think it's normal. It is abnormal for people to push down on people. And war is not normal. It's common, it's perpetual, but it's not okay. And it's not the way things were meant to be. We live with a God who is rich in plenty, and famine should not be the way things are. It's just common. And you weren't made to die. It's not normal. It's just common. If things had stayed like they were in the first place, none of that would have been the story. But if somehow we could get back to when things were new. Edu, Kaina, Pueo, Panta. Behold, I am making all things new. Guys, it is the delight of your God to love you and to welcome you to himself. It is the delight of God to live with you as you would have been had you never sinned, and to make you fresh and beautiful and new and fully alive. And this is not just his delight, it is his intent and his promise. And what God says he will do, he does. He has kept every promise he's ever made. And this is a promise. One day he will make all things new. And when he does, oh my goodness, when he does, immediately before that statement by God, there is this beautiful description of what that looks like. It's in Revelation chapter 21, and it begins partway through verse 3. It says, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. I have never known what that's like. I've known a taste. Jesus has brought to us this wondrous taste and poured out as a seal upon us, a promise, a seal of the Holy Spirit, so that we know what's coming. Kinda. But folks, he will live among us and in us. And when that happens, there won't be any reason to be sad ever again. We'll forget how to do it. God is the very best person you know. Think for just a moment about the very best person you know. The person that you really like to spend time with. They're your favorite. If you could be with anybody, you'd be with them. And they make you feel safe, and they make you feel happy, and they never mistreat you, and they lead you into laughter, and they sing with you, and they're just great. You got anybody in mind? It's a tall order. Maybe it's just some of that stuff. Okay, look, that person is a pale shadow of God. They are a reflection of God. But here's the thing about God. There is not one sin in God. And every person that everyone in this room just thought of cannot say that. So all of us love with this broken selfishness that's messed up with our love. But he doesn't have that. He loves perfectly, always has. He's really, really good at it. Before the foundations of the world, before the ages began, when there was no time, space, matter, none of it, when there was no creation, but only God. That's hard for me to get my head around because I think, well, where was he? I don't know, because there wasn't a where. There was just him. But what was God? Well, God is Trinity. That's who God is. Father, Son, and Spirit. You see, God doesn't need a universe in order to be content. He doesn't need you and me. He wants you and me, but he doesn't need us. Because inside of God is already perfect love. And Father delights in Son. Son delights in Father. They both love Spirit. Spirit is just thrilled with them. They enjoy the time. Well, not time, but they enjoy each other. They just really love. There you go. And you think about that person you really like and you just want to be with them. That's what they had. If you have somebody like that, you don't have to go do anything to be happy. You could sit in the middle of a rainstorm with that person and you'd be all right. Be okay. You could sit in with that person in the middle of like a war zone and you'd be okay with them. You see, God doesn't need a universe. But he chose to create a universe because what was going on within Trinity is so good and so beautiful. They wanted to share it. So they made more sentient creatures who were able to think and able to love and able to receive love so that he could love you. He wants to be with you. He delights in you. He knows your name and he wants to spend eternity with you. So he made a creation and it all went wrong and he sent Jesus to rescue and redeem it because this is what God has always wanted. You know this phrase, I will be with them and they will be my people and I will be their God. It's all over the place in the Old Testament. It is the heart's longing of your God. He just wants to love you. He just wants to be with you. And he's willing to go through all of the blood and the war and the horror so that he can get you for himself. He's willing to go through cross if he can have you. And he'll make everything new, including you. He isn't making all new things. He's making all things new. He doesn't intend to throw you away. No matter how broken you are, no matter how ruined you are, no matter how badly you feel about yourself, or afraid, or you think, no, but he doesn't know me. Yes, he does know you. And he wants to make you new. Because he delights in you. He loves you. And if it was just that, wouldn't it be enough? To be with the very best person that you know, better than the best person that you know, forever. That would be enough, wouldn't it? He doesn't think so. Because he knows what you've been through. He knows about the 6 a.m. knock on the door. And you open it and it's not that at all. It's a state trooper. He knows that. He knows what you've been through. So he says this. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. It doesn't say every tear will be wiped away. It doesn't say that. It says he will wipe away every tear. I want you to think about that for a moment. Have you cried? Anybody here cry, or is it just me that does that? And you've wept, right? See, he's seen that. Every single time that you've ever wept, he has seen it. He knows. And He knows the pain, and He knows the sorrow. He knows the suffering that comes from what's inside of you, and your sins, and your dissatisfaction with yourself, and your anxiety, and all of your internal pains. And He knows the dissatisfaction that comes from the world around you, because people mistreat you, and people ignore you, and things go badly, and things aren't fair. And He knows how many reasons you've had to cry, and He's counted them all. He has seen every last one, and He saved them in a bottle. But at the end of time, when all of those things are done, the Lord God will come to you, and He will put His thumbs on your cheeks, and He will wipe them away. And when the Lord God wipes away your tears, they never come back. This will be the last time we ever cry. We'll never do it again. You will leave all those broken things behind. And just to make sure that you know it, He says this. And death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. For the former things have passed away. And He who is seated on the throne said, Idu, kaina, poia, panta. Behold, I make all things new. Creation will forget how to cry. It will live in laughter and in joy. And there's not one bit of it He intends to leave behind, including you and me. He intends to claim it as His own and make it whole and beautiful and what it always ought to have been. And at last there will be joy throughout the endless ages for all eternity with the one who sits on the throne. Because one day, this day will be done. See, I live in this day. I live in the day where there is conquerors. Inside my own heart, there's one of those. Cross me, see what happens. I'm really trying. I really am, but I wish I could make promises. God makes promises, but I've learned I can't always keep my promises. I live in a day where there is war. You can hear the horsebeat, the footprints, the hoofbeats of it all around us. Sounds like drums. Sounds like bitterness. Sounds like hate and violence. It's all around. Too often I run into it right in here. There's scarcity in this world. The God of plenty who wants to share and give it away. But we human beings, because of our sinfulness, we hoard, we get tons for ourselves, and others go hungry. And we live in fear. And nothing is as dangerous as a human being that's afraid because of scarcity. I live today, and this day isn't done, and that means that the horse of death is still riding around. But if my dad were here, he would say, take your father's hand. And I'd say, Dad, I really wish I could. What would I give to take your hand? He'd say, oh, buddy, I'm not talking about me. Take your father's hand. Because all will be well when the day is done. We live in this day, but this day will end. It will not last forever. And all will be well when the day is done. Now, what would you give for that? What would you give to live in a world without conquerors or wars or famines or any of the mess? What would you do to live in a world where you could live without the fear of death? What would you do? It's already done. He did it for you. I'd give my left arm. Now he gave both arms. And he had them nailed to wood. It's all purchased. And he's come down off of the cross, and the nail-scarred hand is reaching out to you. And he is saying, if you take my hand, my son, my daughter, my son, all will be well when the day is done. Because edu kaina poyo panta. Behold, I make all things new.